Okay.
For you, Miss, what is digital democracy?
Digital democracy basically is composed of two words, electronics and democracy. So from this combination alone, you can deduce that digital democracy or e-democracy is about the use of information and communication technologies and strategies that involves the internet. It is used by citizens and governments and political organizations alike within political systems in the pursuit of political processes.
Can online activism or democracy replace, supplement, or reduce its offline counterpart?
Well, that's a big question because you lump together online activism and digital democracy, which are two different things. For one, before we proceed to answering the question, we have to distinguish first between the two concepts because we cannot really use them interchangeably. When you talk about hacktivism or the use of hacking to promote political activism in the internet, is that really equal to practicing e-democracy? Many people would say that it's a kind of cyber terrorism. When you take over websites, blogs, or online accounts that are not really yours with the use of hacking, is that really a very good example of democracy? Because e-democracy can be seen with writing political blogs, for example, or signing up or starting a petition in change.org, for example, a website known for initiating, online petitions for political issues. So when you talk about activism, I think my first point is that you don't have to lump it together with e-democracy. So if you want, I'll answer your question by focusing on e-democracy. Let's drop the hacktivism part. Is that fine?
Yes.
Okay, so your question is, can it truly replace real-world politics? I would say in some respects, yes. In some respects. Because the beauty of e-democracy is that it resembles the purest form of democracy as practiced in Greece before, wherein there are just 20 people, and direct democracy is practiced because each and every one, their opinions are all factored in making decisions. That's possible because the population is very limited. I think with the use of the internet, you can do online polls. It's so easy to do statistical polling. You can certainly say that it is more convenient to do that rather than meet these people in a town hall. Okay, raise your hands and count everybody. It's not really the convenient way of doing it. But that is just one aspect of politics. What about social movements? What about protest rallies? Based on my experience, you only use ICTs to organize people, but you need to launch a social movement by people appearing in the streets, real people. It couldn't be replaced by change.org signatures because these online signatures, for example, or online lobbies are easily ignored by our very dear politicians. It's so easy for them to treat them bypass them and ignore them. So, in some respects, I'd say yes, it's even more convenient to resort to e-democracy. But if you talk about realpolitik, like rallies, social movements, political revolutions, you can never replace real politics with e-democracy. You can use it for organizing, just like what happened in Turkey, just like what happened in Egypt in 2009 and 2010. In Tunisia, there was this uprising, Twitter revolution, as they call it, social media uprising. And also, that in Singapore, there are new breeds of, a new breed of politicians who became popular simply because of Facebook. As television and print media became obsolete, new politicians who are very young and very popular online have successfully entered the Singaporean political system. So I'd say it's making an impact, but we cannot generalize it can totally replace real world politics.
What do you think is the impact of the so-called hacktivism and online democracy to the people?
Well, hacktivism creates fear. Just like real-world terrorism, it inflicts. It's a scare tactic where people become wary of insidious elements trying to take over their personal pages, websites, and when you hear about government websites being hacked, it sends an alarm to everyone, especially when you talk about key social services. What about, just imagine Land Bank, for example, just a government bank being taken over by a hacker. Isn't that something alarming for everyone? What about those who receive their salaries using online banks and government-managed websites? Think of Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas being taken over by hackers. Isn't that very frightening? So, I think, just like terrorism, wala siyang ipinaglalaban, but it is done. You don't really know the reason why people do it. Or even if they say so, the methods that they use creates fear and a climate of insecurity among ordinary citizens. But if you talk about e-democracy, it's much different. If you use e-democracy responsibly, you can create deliberative participation, as what the theorist Jürgen Habermas says. It promotes communicative freedom. It allows the political voice of the ordinary citizen to be foregrounded and to be given space. In a country composed of 100 million Filipinos, it's not possible for the government to listen to all of them. So, blogging and e-democracy, the concept of e-town halls, if you've heard of that, is really very helpful now, as they constitute people and allow their voices to be heard. So it's good.
Does freedom of speech, both online and offline, encourage development?
Well, when you talk about freedom, it's always very good. If you talk about the growth of societies, it's not only about the GDP growth, but you also talk about the growth of freedom. We always criticize China, for example, that its GNP and GDP is fast rising, but it is inversely proportional to the growth of its freedom with the ban of the internet and free websites. So many people are saying its growth is unhealthy because you're only growing economically, but you're not growing in terms of politics. Just like Japan, it's an economic giant, but it's called a political dwarf because politically they have a very small military and they don't really, they're not able to influence international politics very much. So what we're seeing here is that the growth of e-democracy is very good for politics. So if you apply that to the Philippines, where blogging is very healthy, Philippines, has one of the healthiest, most lively blogosphere in the whole world. I think we're one of the top 5. Singapore and I don't know, there are some Middle Eastern countries who are, very known for using that for politics. It promotes political growth, and because political growth is growing, there are so many studies that would also support that when you nurture political growth, you're also able to nurture economic growth at the same time.
Is the practice of democracy shown in breaking rules like hacking into a government website?
Come again, can you repeat the question?
Is the practice of democracy shown in breaking rules like hacking into a government website?
I don't even think that's an example of democratic practice. It's a violation of democracy. Because in democracy, what is enshrined, if you follow the John Locke tradition of democracy, where liberalism is enshrined, you have to respect rights. That's why in the Constitution that was inspired by the Americans, we have to respect the various rights of people. And if you want your country to be named a democratic or a free country, these rights must be enshrined. In the Philippines, we know that these rights were violated during the martial law, right? Because people were killed arbitrarily, there was a curfew, you couldn't really move, you cannot say anything that you want. Now, if you hear that there are some people hacking sites that they do not own, stealing passwords, taking over and pretending that they own those sites and use it for their interest, that is clearly a disrespect of other people's rights. That is clearly a disrespect of the right of the owner of the website. So I don't think that that is an example of e-democracy. I believe that's an example of cyber terrorism.
Yes, that's all.
Thank you.